Today we are chatting about plants that fit beautifully in those narrow planters. Let's go. All right, the first one we are looking at is Sansevieria, commonly known as snake plant. It's got a beautiful form with long, slender leaves. The leaf almost looks sword-like. It's upright and rigid with a pointed end. Now, that pointed end does not have a sharp terminal spine, so you don't have to worry about it like some other plants like agaves and things like that. This plant can actually reach up to about 4 feet, but is generally seen a little bit shorter, about 2 to 3 feet, somewhere in there. And it does easily fit in those very narrow planters. It stays upright and slender. This is actually an incredibly popular plant to grow indoors, but it can also be grown outdoors in USDA zones 9 through 11. This plant is incredibly adaptable to different light conditions. It can go in full sun in more mild and seacoast climates, but it can also do nearly full shade. It does like to be protected from hot afternoon sun in those warmer climates. Now, there are several different cultivars of the snake plant, and most have some kind of variegation to the leaves. The most commonly found one is Sansevieria trifasciata variegata, and that generally has a dark green leaf with a variegated margin. Although the watering needs are considered medium, it is actually fairly drought tolerant once it's established. Just make sure to give it a well-drained soil, especially if you're putting it in a pot. And as far as maintenance goes, it is a very, very low maintenance plant. All right, awesome. Plant number 2, that is Furcraea macdougallii. It's actually a succulent, and it's very drought tolerant once established. It could go right along with other succulents and cacti and just creates a beautiful, upright, dramatic accent. These can get fairly tall, up to about 15 to 20 feet tall in its natural habitat. Now, I've never seen them that tall, but just note that they can get that tall, so give them the vertical space that they need. They can still be kept very slender and narrow for those tight planter areas. Make sure to plant it in full sun and give it well-drained soil. Now, in terms of maintenance, you just want to pull the leaves off the base as it matures, and that trunk will become exposed. And that does give you the ability to plant smaller perennials or succulents below it as an understory plant. Now, this plant will bloom, but it's going to take a long time to do it. It's not going to bloom generally until the trunk reaches about 7 to 10 feet, so that'll be quite a while. But this plant is really used for its dramatic, upright foliage. Next plant we are looking at is Pedilanthus, commonly named slipper plant. This is another gorgeous, show-stopping succulent. It's gonna get about 5 feet tall, and if left alone, it can get about 5 feet wide because the branches sort of arch over and create sort of a vase-like shape, but you can trim those up so it stays nice and neat and slender. The stems are beautiful, tall and cylindrical, and they don't get really dense. It's more of an open, airy kind of feeling. And one of the things I love most about this plant is the gorgeous red-orange bloom it produces. It's a very unique and intricate flowering structure. It's incredibly drought tolerant once it's established, and it's very heat tolerant also, which is fantastic for those inland climates. Plant other cacti and succulents with it to create a beautiful contrast. And again, very low maintenance on this one. One of its best features. All you have to do is trim off some of those branches that start to flop over and look leggy to maintain that nice, slender look. The very next plant we are looking at is Equisetum, commonly known as horsetail. I have done a video of this before. I'm going to put the link right above here. You can check that out for a little bit more information. This plant does incredible in narrow spaces. It's got beautiful, tall, slender, herbaceous stems with beautiful contrasting black rings, creating a sectional look. Now, these plants can get up to about 4 to 5 feet tall or a little bit more, but they're generally trimmed on top to create a very clean look. And because of that super crisp, clean look that they create, they go really well in modern landscapes. I've seen them complement colorful walls really well. I've seen them used on many occasions in front of office buildings or corporate settings, and even outside dining areas. It's incredibly versatile. It can thrive in full sun or full shade. And it's also used as a bog plant. It can grow in standing water, and it can go in those very narrow planter spaces. Just note, this plant can become pretty invasive. It can spread by spores and underground rhizomes, so you have to be very conscious of where this plant is going to be planted because it will naturalize an area. Now, if you are looking for a taller screening plant, you can use Podocarpus gracilior, commonly known as fern pine. This can grow up into a full-size tree, but if kept pruned, it can actually create a really nice screening element in a narrow planter. The foliage is a beautiful medium to light limey green and can get dense enough to hide a background or a wall. In terms of maintenance, you do have to shear it every so often to maintain that nice form, but generally it's still considered a moderate to low maintenance plant. Plant Podocarpus in full sun to part shade, and it is relatively drought tolerant once it's established. Now, because this is taller growing, you definitely want to give it that vertical space. Don't plant it under house eaves or the canopy of another tree where it could become problematic. It makes a fantastic privacy screen or windbreak. I'm telling you, this is a wonderful solution for a property line screening situation where you only have a narrow planter space. The root system, it's fairly non-invasive. It's nowhere near as bad as, let's say, a ficus, for instance. But you still want to be conscious of how close you're planting it to an adjacent hardscape surface. Podocarpus is so much less problematic than ficus and many other plants. Now, as an honorable mention, I do want to throw out a vine for you guys. I really like Calliandra. If you have a situation where you have a very narrow planter bed and a wall adjacent to it, you can install a steel cable on the wall to help attach the vine so it can grow vertically. And it'll just visually soften that wall and create a beautiful green element rather than just having a blank concrete or stucco wall. So that is it. Thank you guys for joining me on yet another video. Please like, subscribe, and just crush that bell notification so you know when the next video comes out. Thanks for hanging with me today. I'll see you guys on the next one. And as always, happy planting.